Yo, what up guys? In today's video, I'll be going over my top 10 performances in the month of April. As I'm recording this, it's currently May 3rd, and I just wanted to make a new series on this channel talking about the best performances of each month, so let's get right into it. So when I talk about performances, I'm mainly talking about how entertaining the fight is and the adversity these fighters go through to get the win. I don't want to judge these fights based off flawless victories or knockouts, but more so what they went through to get this win. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So I'll be picking the top 10 performances in the month of April. Starting off at number 10, I have Cub Swanson versus Nate Landwehr. Going into this fight, everybody knew that this was going to be Cub Swanson's last fight in the UFC. So the UFC gave him a guy like Nate Landwehr who was coming into this fight on a 2-fight losing streak and losing those 2 fights by knockout. So this was a perfect matchup for Cub Swanson going into his last fight. Then going into the first round, Cub Swanson was looking sharp. Everything he was throwing was accurate and with bad intentions, really showing that he wanted to knock out Nate that night. Cub was throwing nasty body shots and landing a overhand right that would stun Nate, and it was pretty much a flawless victory from the beginning of the fight. This was a fairy tale ending for Cub Swanson. Nate never really threw anything meaningful at Cub, so Cub Swanson's confidence just grew as the round was going. Cub Swanson then would throw a nasty left hand that would drop Nate for the first time in the fight, and Nate would scramble to get right back up, but after he did that, Cub Swanson would throw a leg kick and then throw a straight right hand that would drop Nate once again. So then Herb Dean had to step in and just end the fight. And as he ended the fight, Nate tried to take down Herb Dean, but it was all over, and an amazing win for Cub Swanson. And what a way to end his career by a beautiful knockout win in the first round. And I know I just said that this video isn't about flawless victories, but I just had to add this on the list. This was a beautiful fight from Cub Swanson, and especially being his retirement fight, I just had to add it on the top 10 for the month. And at number 9, I have Jai Herbert defeating Nalo. First of all, this fight was insane. This was Nalo's UFC debut in his home country against a nasty striker like Jai Herbert. And going into this fight, Jai Herbert was a slight underdog, and this fight was pretty even on paper. Both of them are huge for the lightweight division, with both of them being 6 feet tall and both being in their late 30s. The only thing different about them was the reach, and that was about it. I do feel like Nalo's UFC debut against Jai Herbert was a tough task, but in reality, he's an older fighter at the age of 36, like I said. So the UFC can't really try to build up Nalo and giving him easier opponents, but instead he got a tough, experienced fighter like Jai Herbert. But going into the first round, within the first 10 seconds, Nalo manages to land a head kick, and Nalo would proceed to throw a lot of kicks to the body and to the head, and that would cause Herbert to back up, and it makes him circle away. As he's doing that, Nalo drops him with a nasty right hand, but Herbert gets back up immediately, and he starts to swing a lot to try to get Nalo to back up because he's applying constant pressure. But Jai Herbert manages to catch him with a nasty right hand that would drop Nalo, and Herbert will get on top and just do ground and pound, but he's not able to finish Nalo because he manages to get back up, and Nalo was still shaky from all the damage he's been taken by Herbert. And Herbert does a crazy comeback because he manages to drop Nalo one more time, and that was all she wrote. Jason Herzog ends up calling the fight. Definitely has to be one of the best comeback fights going into this year so far. And during the post-fight interview, Jai Herbert was saying that he's been wanting to be active just because he's a little bit older, and honestly, I would love to see Jai Herbert go against a guy like Mason Jones, just because Mason Jones is a fucking dog. Wales versus England, they gotta book that. And at number 8, I have Josh Hokett defeating Curtis Blades. Is it crazy to have Josh Hokett's performance ranked at number 8? Because the UFC announced this fight as Fight of the Month in April. The thing is, Josh Hokett was making a lot of noise and annoying a lot of these fighters during fight week. Fighters like Carlos Ulberg, Jerry Prochazka, and Curtis Blades. And a lot of people in the MMA community found Josh Hokett very annoying because he was just doing too much, saying too much. But once it came down to the fight, you could call him whatever you want, but he's a dog. He backed up everything he said all fight week and gave us one of the most entertaining fights this year, especially in the heavyweight division. Before the fight even starts, Bruce Buffer is doing Josh Hokett's introduction, and Josh Hokett walks across the octagon and gets in front of Curtis Blades and just flips him off right before the fight even starts. But once the fight starts, Josh applies heavy pressure right away, and Curtis Blades tries to go for a takedown, but Josh Hokett manages to stop it, and after he does that, he flips him off. But at one point during the fight, Curtis Blades stuns Josh Hokett with a jab, and it almost looked like it was a fake reaction, but instantly Josh hits him with a nasty right hand that stuns Curtis Blades, and it damn near drops him. And after that sequence, Josh Hokett just turns up the speed of this fight and blitz him, and both of them just start throwing a shit ton of punches. There was at a point where Curtis Blades had his moments during the fight where he was beating up Josh Hokett and looked like he was about to end the fight. With a minute left in the first round, Curtis Blades had 51 significant strikes to Josh Hokett's 31 significant strikes. But throughout the fight, Josh Hokett would land multiple punches and it would stun Blades and keep him in one spot. But every time that happened, Blades would end up hitting him back, and that would back up Josh Hokett. But at the end of the fight, Josh Hokett manages to defeat ranked number 6 Curtis Blades, and it was announced that he gave Curtis Blades a broken nose and a fractured orbital. I think that Josh Hokett really came into the UFC and saved the heavyweight division. And if you guys go and look back at my old video of the prediction against Curtis Blades, I had Curtis Blades winning, but Josh Hokett proved me wrong and that he's here to stay. And I can't wait for that Derek Lewis fight at the White House. And now for the 7th spot, I have Tresean Gore defeating Asmat Bikoev. Might have said that wrong. Going into this fight, Tresean Gore was on a 2-fight losing streak and he was the biggest underdog on that card, so he was projected to get smoked. But going into the first round, Asmat had a lot of success with the leg kicks and kicks to the body, but Tresean Gore would respond with his own kicks in return. And in the first round, with a minute left into the round, Tresean Gore stuns him with a nasty spinning back fist. But it was a close first round. Both of them had a lot of success with the striking and it could have gone either way. But in the second round, this is where things start to turn up. A minute into that second round, Asmat lands 2 vicious right hands and drops Tresean Gore, looking like the fight was about to be called off. But Tresean Gore manages to get back up and just starts swinging at Asmat and lands a 2-punch combination that backed up Asmat, and he proceeds to go for a takedown. But Tresean Gore was eating big punches from Asmat, because if you've ever seen Asmat fight before, you know he has knockout power. So for Tresean Gore to eat those punches, it was pretty crazy. But at one point during the fight, Asmat takes down Tresean Gore, but Tresean Gore ends up reversing it and he takes down Asmat himself. Like, he gets back up and he takes him back down, but you could tell that Asmat was so tired. And in the last 10 seconds of the second round, Tresean Gore throws nasty body shots that hurts Asmat. And once that round was over, Asmat's corner was telling him that he has to win this third round, that this fight is really close. And that's what I find crazy, because Tresean Gore was a plus 400, I believe. But going into that third round, after endless kicks from Tresean Gore, it caught up to Asmat to the point where Asmat couldn't stand on his left leg. And since he couldn't stand anymore, he went for a takedown. And that was the worst mistake he could have done, because Tresean Gore manages to get him in a guillotine and makes him tap. And what's crazy is that I have this at my 7th ranked best performances of April. And it's an amazing one, because being the biggest underdog on the card and to pull out a win like that, well deserved. After an amazing win, Tresean Gore then proceeds to call out Atiba for his next fight, which I think is crazy to say, because not a lot of fighters say that. So I would hope that the UFC books that fight, because that one would be a banger. And I know that Atiba is fighting this Saturday against Ozzy Diaz, I believe, but that's easy work for him. That's light work. So like I said, hopefully the UFC books Atiba versus Tresean Gore. But next up at number 6, I have Paulo Costa defeating Asmat Mirzakhanov. So for this fight, Paulo Costa was making his light heavyweight debut, and there was a lot of shit talking going on from both sides, so there was beef going into this fight. But in the first round, Paulo Costa was having a lot of success with his head kicks and kicks to the body, to the point where it made Asmat flinch to a lot of the shots halfway into the first round. But Costa looked very fast for a light heavyweight. I thought him going up was going to make him look slower or throw slower, but it was the complete opposite. He looked exactly how he did when he was in middleweight, and that's dangerous. But with a minute left into that first round, Paulo Costa was 15 for 18 on his significant strikes, so he was very accurate from the beginning of the fight. But in the second round, Paulo Costa was still having a lot of success with the kicks, but halfway through that round, Mirzakhanov stuns Costa with a hard left hand, and Costa tries to clinch but gets dropped by Mirzakhanov. But with a minute left into that second round as well, Mirzakhanov takes down Costa and puts him in a headlock, but Paulo Costa was able to reverse him and get the fight back on the feet, which that second round was crazy. But in that third round, Paulo Costa throws a head kick off the bat once the round starts, and that same exact kick was blocked by Asmat, but it seems like he injured his arm trying to block it, and I think that Paulo Costa noticed that too, so he then throws another head kick and he catches him again with a head kick, and it was pretty much over after that. But I was really impressed with Paulo Costa with this fight, because like I said, he was still moving like a middleweight, and he really showed the power and the speed that he still has. And not gonna lie, I would love to see Paulo Costa go against Khalil Roundtree, because that is must see TV. I still do think that he is one win away from a title shot, I believe. But at the number 5 spot, I have Aaron Pico defeating Patricio Pitbull. Going into the first round, both of them had their moments where Pitbull had success with the striking, because he was able to cut Pico on his nose very early into that fight. But once Pico started to feel like Pitbull was having success with the striking, he took him down. and which was really good because we all saw what happened last time. But going into that second round, Pico started off the fight with a beautiful 1-2 combo, and as the round went on, he felt more comfortable with his striking, and he stunned Pitbull in the second round. I think overall, Pico's striking and wrestling looked really good the way he was mixing it up. He was having Pitbull worry about the wrestling, and when he worried about the wrestling, he strike, and vice versa. But really the key in this fight was Aaron Pico's speed. That played a big factor because this version of Pico was really good to see. And he ends up dropping Pitbull halfway through that second round with a nasty right hand. And at the time, Pico had 30 significant strikes to Pitbull's 6 significant strikes. And what's crazy is that you could hear how hard Pico was hitting Pitbull, and he was just eating everything. But Pico manages to win this fight by decision. I was really impressed how he came back, and I understand that it's Pitbull and it's not another UFC guy, but this was really good to see. There was an interview of Pico talking about that he felt like this was a must-win fight. He was telling himself that if he didn't win this fight, there was a chance he was going to get cut. But this was an amazing performance. I would love to see him fight against Kevin Vallejos. That would be an absolute banger, and it makes sense. I believe Kevin Vallejos is ranked number 10, and Pico just got ranked at 13, so I think that would be a really good fight. And at the number 4 spot, I have Moicano defeating Chris Duncan. What's crazy is that going into this fight, these guys are teammates. But in the first round, Chris Duncan was throwing a lot of leg kicks, and Moicano was checking every leg kick he threw. I swear. Almost as if he was reading Chris Duncan's every move, like nothing. He was one step ahead of him every time. And every time Moicano would throw a right hand, he would land, catching him a few times with that right hand. But going into that second round is where Moicano turned into a demon. And like I said, Moicano was landing every jab and every right hand he was throwing. But 2 minutes into that second round is where Moicano dropped Chris Duncan with a nasty left hand. And Moicano instantly takes him to the floor and gets on his back. And it takes him a few minutes trying to look for that finish, but he ends up getting him in a beautiful rear naked choke. And at the number 3 spot, I have Ethan Ewing defeating Rafael Estevam. Going into this fight, Estevam was 14-0, and this is another undefeated opponent for Ewing that he has to face. But in the first round, Estevam was throwing a lot of heavy shots, but Ewing manages to clip him with a nasty flush left hook. And after Estevam took that shot, he then tries to take down Ewing, but Ewing was able to sprawl and keep the fight standing. Ethan was throwing a lot of singular shots in the first round. As in with Estevam, he was throwing a lot of heavy punches. But in the last 12 seconds of the first round, Estevam goes for another takedown. And once again, Ewing stops it, making him 5 for 5 on takedown defenses. But after that, Ewing lands a nasty 4-punch combo, knocking down Estevam in the last seconds. But Rafael Estevam was saved by the bell. But going into that second round is where Ethan Ewing striking looked absolutely amazing. He was not missing with his right hand at all, and you could hear how hard he's hitting him. But with a minute left into that second round, Ewing had 30 significant strikes to the head, and he literally stopped every takedown from Estevam. But Estevam manages to survive that second round. But in that last round is where this fight really ended. Ethan was having a striking clinic because he ends up dropping Estevam with a nasty body shot, and that's what pretty much ended the fight. And what's crazy is that he didn't even get performance of the night on that fight card, which was crazy. I was really impressed with his performance because that's 2 guys he defeated that were undefeated. And in his post-fight interview, he called out all the undefeated guys in the bantamweight division. And I would love for Ethan Ewing to go against Farid Basharat. That would be a crazy matchup. And at the number 2 spot, I have Aljamain Sterling defeating Yusuf Zalal. I think Aljamain is one of the most disrespected fighters in the UFC. Going into this fight, he was an underdog, which is crazy because he was a former champion, and his only loss in the featherweight division was against Mosvar, which is understandable because he is undefeated. But Aljamain dominated this fight against Yusuf Zalal. He didn't stand a chance against Aljamain. And a lot of people hate on Aljamain because the way he fights, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I was really impressed with Aljamain and how he went throughout the fight. Yusuf's only chance in the fight was in the third round. With a minute left into that round, Aljamain picked him up and tried to slam Yusuf, but mid-air, Yusuf attempts a guillotine, and he almost gets Aljamain because it looked really tight for a bit, but he was able to get out of it, which was really impressive. But Aljamain ends up defeating Yusuf by decision, but his overall performance was really good and dominant, and once again, the UFC does not give him performance of the night. He low-key calls them out. I do hope one day that Aljamain gets a shot at the featherweight belt. I understand that Mosvar is up next, but if somehow, some way Mosvar can't get that fight in, I do think Aljamain should be called up for that title shot next. And now, finally, for the number 1 spot, of course, it has to be this fight. Carlos Ulberg defeating Yuri for the light heavyweight belt. Carlos ends up tearing his ACL into that first round, and I remember watching it and I thought it was over. He kept stumbling, almost like he couldn't even stand, but he somehow managed to knock out Yuri in that first round. A lot of fighters would give up if that was to happen to them, but Carlos Ulberg is the complete opposite and is literally a champion because of it. He knew that he had to knock him out because there was a good chance the doctors were going to stop it if the first round was to end. But shout out to Carlos Ulberg because that was an insane knockout. I literally thought it was over. I thought Yuri was just going to win by doctor stoppage, but Ulberg had a different plan and he shook the world with that. This one's very short and simple, but that concludes this video. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. I hope this is a valid top 10 performances of the month for April, and I'll see you guys in the next one.